Okay, Parshas Vigash, Perek Memvov, Pasuk Dalid. We're going to talk about the end of Pasuk Dalid, something we discussed briefly in the previous shir, or maybe 2 shirim ago. We're going to talk about it at length, and that is these last 5 words: the Yosef Yoshis Yodoi al Einecha. So Hashem promised Yaakov that Hashem, will go down with Yaakov to Mitzrayim and bring him back up. And Yosef will place his hand on his Yaakov's eyes, which Pashup Pshat seems to mean that at the time of Yaakov's death, when Yaakov closes his eyes, Yosef will be there to put his hand on Yaakov's eyes, which is to say, to close his eyes, or to cover his eyes. And there's some sort of idea that at that time of death, that's something to do. You close the eyes of the dead person, which indicates that he doesn't see this world anymore or something like that. Okay. Now, so Pashup Pshat, it's saying like this. What does Yaakov care about most? Seeing Yosef before he dies. As he said, Il chover enu b'term amos. And after he sees him, he says, Amusa hapam acharei ro'esias panecha ki yodecho chai. So when Hashem tells Yaakov, Yosef Yoshis Yodo al Einecha, he will cover your eyes with his hand. It's like saying the last thing you see before you die will be Yosef, which is exactly what Yaakov wants, to be certain to see Yosef before he dies. And the idea of him seeing Yosef before he dies is that Yaakov was concerned that his death marks an end, a final end, and there's not going to be a continuity from him to the next generation because he lost Yosef. He was afraid he would lose Binyamin, he lost Rachel, etc. The fact that he's seeing Yosef before he dies means his death is not final, there's going to be a continuity. And then that's even more given even a greater symbol by the fact that it's saying that Yosef will cover your eyes with his hand. He will place his hand over your eyes, meaning he will be the last thing you see before your death. You will die knowing that he is there to continue your mission. And that's why I think the pasuk puts this after al chagam olo anochi ered imacham mitzayim v'anochi al chagam oloi v'yosef yoshes yodoi aleinecha. It's saying like this: your descent to Mitzrayim is not an end. On the contrary, I, Hashem, who have been with you till now in Eretz Yisrael, will go with you and bring you back, because it's not going to be there's not going to be a finality to it. It's going to continue, and it's going to continue through Yosef, who's going to be there at the time of your death. So, in other words, the ratio of the pasuk that says Hashem will bring him back up leads to the Sefer, because the ratio of the pasuk is saying that your descent to Mitzrayim is not going to be your end. Rather, you are still going to have access to Hashgacha, which will therefore ensure that you come back from Mitzrayim. And the way that's going to happen, the way that Hashem is going to mashkiach over you after your death, is that Yosef is going to be there at the time of your death, and therefore what's important for you is going to be borne out and continue through Yosef. And of course, Yosef is mashbiach to take out his bones, and they take out Yaakov's bones. That may be also related. But the point is that Yosef is going to continue your mission, and therefore there's going to be a continuity of hashgacha. So this is the most basic pshat in the pasuk. Now there's a deeper pshat too, because the notion of Yaakov seeing and Yaakov's eyes, and Yaakov seeing before his death takes particular expression in Perek Mem Ches, where the pasuk says, the pasuk describes the events of Yaakov with Yosef and his children before Yaakov's death. And there it says that Yaakov was blind, couldn't see. And then he says, this is after it says, Lo yuchal lirais. So first it says, Lo yuchal lirais, he can't see. And then Yaakov says, I didn't even expect, I didn't judge, I didn't expect to see your face, and now Elokim showed me your Zeratut. And this is notably after the pasuk says that he couldn't see. He talks about everything he's seeing. and he couldn't see, that's borne out by the fact that Yosef thinks he doesn't see who's in front of him. Menashe and Ephraim, he's getting his hands switched. But Yaakov tells him, Yodati ben Yodati, which is to say that you think, Yosef, you think I can't see. Really, I can't see. And we see that in this beginning psukim where it starts off saying Yaakov can't see, and then he talks about everything Hashem is showing him. So can he or can't he see? The answer is, well, he can't see because he's blind. But he can see, he is able to see because Hashem is showing him things. So Dafka, when he's blind, at the time that he's blind, he's able to see with the eye of God. Similarly to Yitzchak, who and that's when he is led by Hashem to select the correct son to bless, who's the younger one. Similarly, Yaakov, when he's blind, he's now really able to see with the eyes of Hashem, who guides him beyond what he could have even imagined himself. I wouldn't have even thought to see your face, and now I'm seeing things that are beyond what I would have considered to be expected or judged appropriate, or rather judged, maybe judged likely, because now Hashem is giving me a kind of re'iyah beyond the one that I was expecting. Okay, so what does that mean? So now, obviously, that's connected to this pasuk. We'll soon see how connected it is. But on the basic level, Yaakov's eyes are closing, and there's an involvement with Yosef. So that suggests then that Yosef Yoshes Yodei Alenecha has something to do with Yaakov attaining this better prophetic, godly vision. So from that reading, it would be like this: Il chover enu, I want to see him. A term almost means I want some kind of re'iyah that I didn't expect, something that Hashem is granting me. And then Anochi ered imcha mitzayim, Anochi al-chagam oleh is saying that I will be with you and I will do things for you in a godly way that you wouldn't have expected in a human way. And therefore, Anochi al-chagam oleh, because I'm going to you in Mitzrayim, but I'm going to grant you hashgacha and re'iyah beyond what you have on your own. So then we read it like this. Then we would read it like this. So going back to what I said before, that they close the eyes of the dead person because the dead person now doesn't see this world. Instead, he sees Hashem at the time of his death. So that's mamish with the pasuk. That's mamish connects. That's all I make up shot over here, because at the time of Yaakov's death, he can't see. He's old. He can't see, but he sees with the eyes of Hashem. And similarly, at the time, so there, and here the pasuk is saying that upgrade when you're closing your own eyes, but you're going to see with the eyes of Hashem, is going to happen in an association with Yosef. Okay. Good. Again, association with Yosef, because as we said, Yosef is going to be the heir of Yaakov, is going to continue him. Where Yosef fits into this, we'll get to that soon. But I'm saying is like this, that al einecha, yashes yodei al einecha, means your eyes will close. When your eyes closed, that's when your spiritual eyes open to seeing what the physical eyes cannot see. And that's going to happen through Yosef somehow. Okay, so now let's ask, when did this happen? In other words, it doesn't say Yaakov died and Yosef closed his eyes. But as we keep on saying, there's a parsha in Vayichi, Perek Mem Ches, that's very closely related to this, because there it says something about the eyes of Yisrael that they couldn't see. And there we have the pasuk Yoshes, the word Yoshes, because it says Yosef saw that Yoshes Alav, Yoshes Aviv Yad Yamin al Reish Ephraim. So first the pasuk says that Yaakov stretched out his right hand by Yoshes al Reish Ephraim. So use the word Yoshes, and it's about the Yad. So in other words, here we have in our pasuk Yosef Yoshes Yodoi al Einecha, and in that parsha we have the Einei Yisrael that are blind, and the Yad of Yaakov, not of Yosef, but a Yad, and he's Yoshes, and it's Ra Be'enei Yosef. Okay, so it clearly seems to be connected. In other words, here you have this interesting expression, Yosef Yashis Yadei Alenecho, and you have this whole story about the Eine Yisrael and where the Yad is Shas, but over there it's the Yad of Yaakov, not the Yad of Yosef. How does it connect? Okay. So in order to show you how I think it connects, even though it's, I think I'm still missing something. But I wanted to first take you onto a detour to another Yoshis, and that is in Pashas Mishpatim. V'chi yinotzu anoshim v'nogafu isha hara v'yotzu yiladeha v'lo yeh asayin anoishi aneish kasher yoshis olav ba'al ha'isha v'nasan biflilim v'im asayin yeh v'nasan nefesh tachas nefesh. Okay, so two men are quarreling and they strike a pregnant woman and her babies leave her. Then what's the rule? The husband is shas. The husband places an amount or some kind of reparation on the one that damaged the babies, killed the babies. V'nasan b'flilim, he has to give it according to the judges. V'im ason that the woman dies, then nefesh tachas nefesh. Fine. So this is the only other place in Torah where we have the word ason, besides for in the context of Binyamin, where Yaakov is afraid that an ason might occur to him. And we mentioned this in the past. What was Yaakov afraid? That Rachel died, Yosef died, he thinks, and if something happens to Binyamin, that's going to be an ason. And in that parsha, if the woman dies and her babies, plural, Yotzu Yiladeha, she has two babies. If the woman and her two babies dies, that's called an ason. And Yaakov was afraid, as the Medrash says, that there may have been a gzeira on Rachel, that she and her children will die on the road during the travels. So there's this thing called an ason. An ason is when a woman and her two children die, and that's some sort of category that Yaakov is afraid was decreed on Rachel. But in fact, he learned that there was no ason, meaning Binyamin was safe, and even Yosef was safe. Parenthetically, he said, "Vayetze ha'echad me'iti." One of them was Yotze me'iti, and in that context of the Ishahar, we have a Yotzu Yiladeha. Okay. So ultimately, there was no ason. So what happens if there's no ason? The pasuk says that kasha yoshis alav baal ha'isha v'nasan b'flilim. So here you have another yoshis. The baal ha'isha, according to our theory, is Yaakov, and it says v'nasan. This is a weird word, b'flilim. And Yaakov said, "Ro'ei fanecha loy filolti." Okay, so now I want to explain to you what's going on with this. What is the point of the pasuk saying v'nasan b'flilim? What's the message of the fact that the baal ha'isha places estimates and decides what he should pay, but the flilim, the judges, ratify it? What's the deep message over there, and how does this connect back to Yaakov, who's the baal ha'isha Rachel, and he gets a flilim from Hashem? So to understand this, you have to, I think, this other pasuk is very much connected. The pasuk says that Eli told his children the following, he gave them Musar. He told them the following amazing thing. Im yecheta ish la'ish ufil loy elokim, ve'im lashem yecheta ish mi yispal loy. If a man sins against his fellow man, then Hashem could be filal him. But if a person sins to Hashem, who could be mispal of him? Which means, I think, the following. In the context of Yosef, there was a sin of brother to brother, man to man. And what happened in that context? Atem chashavtem alay ro'a lekim chashav l'tova. Man can do evil, but God can take the evil that man did and make it into good. So that's like the pasuk saying in Shmuel, Yechta ish la'ishu fil le'lekim. You can judge the outcome of something to be negative. You can judge the outcome of selling your brother to only be negative, but Hashem could turn it into something good. Yaakov could judge the outcome of his life events to not lead up to him being reunited with his son, but Hashem has a plan, and that's called Pilloy Elokim, that goes beyond what humans think of as being good or evil, and therefore a person could do wrong and Hashem could right it. But if a person does wrong to Hashem and ruins his relationship with Hashem, then Hashem is no longer working with him. So if you're working with Hashem and you mess up in your Toivrat to your fellow man, then Hashem can, like the brothers did to Yosef, then Hashem will take that and make something right out of that. But if you mess up your relationship with Hashem, then you no longer have Hashem to right your wrongs, and then you're in big trouble. So we have this notion that Pilel, which is to kind of judge things and to discern and to bring to outcomes, Hashem can do it in a way that man cannot. It's exactly what Yaakov is saying. Meaning, from my perspective, my judgment, this outcome was impossible, but Hashem is able to do things that man can't fathom. Mamish, the message of Yosef to his brothers, that's the whole deep message of the Yosef story. And the message of this pasuk in Shmuel, okay, now going back to the babies, says the Mechilta, Plilim means judges, because the pasuk says Pil Elikim, and we know the whole concept of Elikim or Elihim in Pashas Mishpatim, that there's a whole notion of justice happens by virtue of the Elihim, the judges who represent Hashem. So I think what the pasuk is saying is like this: certain kinds of things can happen, ish la'ish, such as ki natzu anashim v'nag for isha hara. That's an example of ish la'ish. The husband could say, look, this is what I think is right, but he has to do it b'flilim, meaning the Elokim, the judges who represent Hashem, are able to step in and make right where something's wrong. So the husband could say what he thinks is appropriate, but the plilim have to be the ones who sign off on it or ratify it, because the plilim, the role of the Elohim, is to make right out of a yechta ish la'ish. So there's like this, there's this partnership between the husband and the plilim. The husband's, like the pasuk is like the husband suggests what he thinks is right or something like that, and the plilim have to sign off on it. And that's like a partnership between man and God, because the plilim represent God, the Elokim. And they're the ones, they give the ability for the husband to get to make it right, or to get what he needs to make it right. Okay. So let's think about this. So now I want to go back to Yaakov. So let's read the parsha like this. And we read that into Yaakov's story. That what? That the husband who lost his children, and there was no asain. Again, in Pashas Batim V'lo asain means even though he lost the children, the babies, but he didn't lose her. So therefore, he's able to demand, he gets payment instead of a nefesh. In our story, the asain would have been had he lost Binyamin, as it says the Karo asain, and there was no asain. So instead, what happens? So he gets payment for his lost children, but he didn't really lose them. But he suffered because he thought he lost them, but it wasn't actually an asain. So I want to say like this: what happened at the beginning of Parshas Vayechi? He tells Yosef, Ephraim and Menashe, Keruvim v'Shimon Yuli. He's taking two new children. He's gaining two new children. Ephraim and Menashe. I would suggest that the reason why he's gaining two new children is because the he lost Yosef, he lost Binyamin. Now it turns out it all worked out, because the Ma'aseh they were actually alive and he was reunited with them, but he thought he lost them. From the way I saw it, bad things happened to me. Now Hashem has a way of making things right. That's called v'rasan b'flilim. That even when man can't be mispalel, Elokim could be mispalel. And when that happens, the Baal, who had a loss, again in Pashas Prat, the loss is losing the babies. In Pashas Vayechi, in Vigash, the loss is Yaakov lost his relationship with Yosef and with Binyamin for a time. He was afraid he lost him, so he has a right to get something back ratified by Hashem. What he wants back is Ephraim and Menashe. And it's ratified by Hashem because Hine Hera Oisi Elokim Gam Azarecha. Because what I didn't see, Hashem was mispala loy, Pillei Elokim, and what did he show me? He showed me your children, which means that your children are replacing the loss I had of you. It's beautiful, because saying like this: I didn't expect to see you, therefore I lost you. Because I lost you, meaning I never thought of this. This is not part of my world, part of my life. Hashem intervened and gave me a pilel beyond the human kind of pilel, beyond what I could have known. And that's because Hashem repays the one who lost his children, like it says in Pashas Mishpatim. And how does he repay him? Well, so here's what I'm being shas. I'm choosing these two children because this is what Hashem is ratifying as the payment for my loss. This is, I think, what's going on over here. I didn't explain yet how we get back to Yosef Yoshel, and we'll get to that soon. Okay, that's what we're up to now. So here's how I want to read it. By the way, Agav, in the next pasuk after Masan Yev Nasat Nefesh Tachas Nefesh is Ayin Tachas Ayin, and then we have also right before that we have Kiyake Eshes Ein Avda. We have Omeis Tachas Yodoi on your Evid. So we have Yad and Ayin in the context of what's it called? Of the Asain and the Plilim. In the case of the Isha as well. Okay, so now the question is fine, very nice, amazing tushtals, very interesting things happening over here. But how do we explain why it says Yosef Yoshis Yodei Alinecha if the parallel parsha is that Yaakov is being shus, not Yosef? So I want to read it like this. As we said, the closing of Yaakov's eyes, Yosef Yoshis Yodei Alinecha, leads into an opening of Yaakov's spiritual eye. So when your eyes close, I will be with you. And then you will see further. And this that you're seeing further is going to happen through Yosef, right? As we mentioned before. Why? Because in that story where Yaakov sees further, Yosef is present. Now, Yosef doesn't understand what Yaakov is doing. He doesn't realize that Yaakov sees better. But he tells him, Yadati b'ni Yadati, I can really see. And in that story, Yosef holds on to the hands of his father to move it aside, but really he's learned that there's a better Riyah. So I would suggest the following, that another element that's happening over there where Yaakov takes Ephraim and Menashe for himself is that he's basically saying that Yosef and Yaakov are one and the same. Because if he says Ephraim and Menashe, Chuvim v'Shimon Yuli, that means me, Yaakov, and you, Yosef, are identical. So the Pashup Shad in our pasuk is that you have a continuity through Yosef. There's also a deeper point, which is that not just a continuity, but an identity between Yaakov and Yosef. So therefore, if that's what's happening in Parshas Vayechi, that Yaakov is saying, you are me and I am you, and therefore your children are mine. Therefore, I would suggest that number one, here the pasuk says Yosef Yoshis Yodoi, but really in Parshas Vayechi we find that Yaakov is the one who shus, because that's the whole point. The whole point of this message is that Yaakov and Yosef are one, and also Yosef holds onto his father's hand and tries to switch them, and then ends up saying no, keep it there. So that at that point, both Yaakov and Yosef have their hands in the same direction. So then Yaakov's new re'iyah of seeing things through God's eyes is going to be picked up by Yosef, who's present and participates when Yaakov gets this new re'iyah, because Yaakov and Yosef are considered to be one. So that's what I'm suggesting. And that's because, why is Yaakov and Yosef considered to be one? Because Yaakov lost Yosef and now he needs to reclaim him, and he's reclaiming him through Ephraim and Menashe, which means he's basically getting a replacement. I think that maybe leads to him being one, if to think about that. Okay, so that is the Vart, which I will just review briefly just to make it all go together. I just want to point out one more thing, which seems to be connected, but I'm not sure how, that in the bracha to Yosef in Parshas Vayechi, we also have Ayin and Yad in a very significant way. Bein Paras Yosef, Bein Paras Ale Oyin, and Vayefozu Zroei Yodav Midei Avir Yaakov. So the hands of Yosef get covered in puz, and that comes from the hands of the mighty one of Yaakov. So first of all, that there's an identity between Yaakov's hands and Yosef's hands, but more in that case also that the hands bring us back to Hashem, Midei Avir Yaakov. Similarly, I'm saying that Einecha of Yaakov becomes the Einayim of Yosef, because he shares in him his vision. He shares with Yosef with him his vision, and the hands of Yosef are identified with the hands of Yaakov, because here it says Yosef Yoshiyad El Einech, but really Yaakov is Shas the Yad, and that's captured in this pasuk. Yodov Midei Avir Yaakov. His hands are a continuation of a schus of the hands of Yaakov and the hands of the God of Yaakov. Okay, so what am I saying? Tachlis, just make sure we have it all. I just want to make sure I got all the points, and I want to explain it all again because it's pretty complicated. Okay, let me just read the psukim again. So the psukim are, just so you know all the psukim in one place. Yosef Yashis Yodei al Einecha, Vayar Eine Yisrael Kavdu Mizoikin Lo Yuchal Lirois, and Vayoshes Yeminoi, Vayar Yosef Ki Yoshis Aviv Yad Yeminoi, Veshefraim Vayir Be'enov Ve'enov. So we have, in our pasuk, we have Yosef, Shos, Yad, and Ayin. That appears again in that story where the Ayin of Yisrael can't see, and he Shos onto with his Yad, and it's Rab Eine Yosef. Okay. Then we have in Parashat Mishpatim that if an Eved dies Tachas Yodoi, and the next parasha talks about Yoshis Olav and Plilim and Osain, and the next thing pasuk is Ayin Tachas Ayin. And then we have back in Parashat Vayechi, Oifanecha Loifi Lolti V'hine Oisi Elokim. The Plilim in Parashat Mishpatim are Elokim, like the Mechilta says, Dayanim. And we have this funny word Pilolti in Vayechi and in Parashat Mishpatim B'Plilim. And that we have in Shmuel, that man, God can make right what man messes up to his fellow man, which is the central theme of the Yosef story. And similarly, Yaakov told Yosef, means God can take something which man cannot fathom and make it into something good. And similarly, I think that's what Kashyashal Balish Nasmaflilim is telling us, that something bad could happen, but the husband can work together with Elohim and make it right. And similarly, the husband here, Yaakov, who lost his children, but there was no asin because they weren't really dead. Lamaisi, he lost them for a while. They were yotzu. They left him. For that, he's able to get reparations that are ratified by God, even things that he couldn't think of. And that's what are the reparations? Ephraim, Menashe, Kiru, and Mishim. It says if he lost 2 children, and therefore he deserves to have 2 new children. The 2 children I'm saying he lost are Yosef and Binyamin, and therefore he gets Ephraim and Menashe to add them to his other children. And this all brings us back to Yosef Yoshis Yodei al Einecha. Why? Because what that means in Naimik Pshat is that when Yaakov loses his vision, which is to say his physical vision, he's going to gain a spiritual vision, and that's captured by this Pillow Elikim and Hera Isi Elikim. And that's going to happen through Yosef's hand. What do you mean through Yosef's hand? Didn't happen through Yaakov's hand? The answer is the whole deep message over there in Vayechi is that Yaakov and Yosef are considered identical, and that's because the children of Yosef are the children of Yaakov. So therefore, here the pasuk could say Yosef Yashis, and we're going to find out that it's Yaakov Yashis, because the deepest meaning of this pasuk is that Yaakov, you're not coming to an end. It's like Yaakov Avinu loy meis, because if Yosef's still alive, you're still alive. Why? Because you can identify yourself with Yosef, and the vision that you attain at your death is going to be something that you share with Yosef, and therefore that's going to give a continuity to your spiritual essence.